All right, we're live,
Here
world.
we go.
So it's another episode of the KEW Exchange, where knowledge through experience transforms into wisdom. And I have my friend Katharine Hargreaves here. Hargreaves. Katharine. I just go with Katharine. Katharine with an A. And she just
Mhm.
moved, so she's working on her Wi-Fi setup. And as the world knows by now, my Wi-Fi is horrible because in the middle of nowhere, it's hard to get Wi-Fi, even when they pretend you have it. It only works well when they're here to test it, but when they leave, it goes to shit again, which is okay. It's the life we live in technology world. And we are just going to talk. We're going to talk a little bit of everything because Katharine is amazing. I've known her for lifetimes, literally, and it's our conversations just inspire me, and I wanted to share them with the world. She's going to be live with me again next month with a couple other people, and we're just going to keep building this because our conversations are pretty. They touch a lot. They touch a lot of different things, and we just go everywhere with them. So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit
Mhm.
so those that don't know you get to know you a little better, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, first of all, Michael, for having me here. So excited to be in your domain, playing in your space. And yeah, who am I? I call myself a culture alchemist. And that's really something I invented to encompass all of the stuff that I do. And really, what my purpose is here is to cultivate, stimulate, teach how to transform. And I can't remember if we've dived into this before, but um, my whole theory, my whole practice, all the stuff that I do is really based on change, principles of change, getting people into a change mindset. So all of my work really orients around how do we make change an adventure? How do we bring ourselves into um, I would say just a much more aligned, integrated relationship with ourselves, our world, the people around us. There's a lot more places I could go with that, but I try and spare the big bio introduction and just really communicate that I focus on the art of transformation. I write, I teach. Um, yeah, so that's where I'll start with that.
That's awesome. I love it. And again, our conversations seem to cover every topic you can imagine. So it's we can really go anywhere with this, anywhere you want. It really doesn't matter to me. I'm open, right? Like I walk into these so open for any type of conversation we can have. So I mean,
Hmm.
why don't we talk a little bit about your new programs that you're doing because they intrigue me, and
That'd be great.
if it intrigues me, then it's going to intrigue others because I don't get impressed by stuff like that very often.
Hmm. Well, that is such a compliment, Michael. So, what Michael is speaking to is a program that I recently launched. It's called GodX. And it's so new for me to even say that in public because it was such a trigger for me for a minute to really acknowledge the God self, and that's what we're playing with. And GodX, it is a miracle mastermind. So for the past, I would say 3 to 5 years, I've been studying patterns of transformation, what I call evolutionary technologies, and really looking at what are the ancient future patterns that have been around for all of time, right? Because those work. And if we know that those work, there's something here that we can really extract and extrapolate into how we live. And I feel like this is something we're going to talk about today, which is my new rant is really about this the colonized mind, right? So we live in this world where we have colonized our minds. And I believe that in order to get back into right relationship, we need to embrace the inherent wildness, right? This timeless understanding, this timeless relationship that we already have. Um, so, you know, my perspective in transformation is no one is broken. Nothing is broken. It is all designed to do exactly what it does. And so if we want to shift something, to me, it's less about what can we fix and rather how can we come back to what is innately real. So I'm getting all into the philosophy and theory of it, but essentially, this miracle mastermind is how do we start to play with these evolutionary technologies and turn them into a game that helps people quantum leap into the reality they'd like to be, whatever that looks like.
And like, okay, so if we take it to, let's just say layman's terms, for lack of better words, it's about finding your best life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And creating your best life for yourself. Mm-hmm. We're just looking
Yeah.
at it on a deeper connected level, right? And we're looking at it as a bringing together a collective group to create or tap into infinite wisdom to be able to bring to the universe and the world in a much more palatable way. And
Yes.
while most people disguise their spiritual purpose, their spiritual meaning, what they're here for, their connectedness, I go straight into it and I lean into it. I go the opposite, right? Most people disguise it. I lean into it. I just don't care, right? I don't care what people think of me. I don't care, and it's fine because everybody has their own opinion, right? Everybody has their own way of, they can only receive what they're able to receive at that moment, right? And there was a period of time that I didn't want to receive it either. I just didn't want to. So why don't talk about your journey a little bit, because you have a very particular journey that's your original journey, right? Like everybody has their own version and their own story. So why don't you go into that a little bit so that you can, so that people get a better understanding of where you're coming from.
Yeah. So, great question. Oh, I have always been outside of the mainstream, the accepted. I've always been an outsider, an outlier, however you want to call it, a pioneer. That's my life path in many ways. So, something I talk a lot about is that there are no straight lines. And so, to me, my path has been extremely circuitous. And so, really, I've been a writer for as long as I've been alive. And when I came out of college, that was my focus. I got the literary degree. I was like, great, what do I do next? And for someone like myself who didn't see myself fitting inside of these traditional career paths, it was really less about what is defined for me and rather how do I take these skills or cultivate the skills that allow me to do the work I'm here to do, which 10 years ago was not clear to me. What was clear to me was that I'm good at being a catalyst. I'm good at shattering previous ideas and conceptions about what something is or looks like, right? And I'm really good at translating big things into accessible insights. So it took me years. It took me like 15 years to really get to the place I'm now, where I actually understand where all the dots connected. So I was a writer, I was a publisher, I was a designer, I was a teacher, I was a director, I was a coach. And when I really started to look at what all of these roles were teaching me, it was essentially to teach, to translate, and to identify what are the core patterns that really fundamentally shape the world. And no matter what I did, it kept coming back to these things. So when I was a designer, I got a role teaching design, which showed me we live in a world that is going to constantly be disrupted. And so we need to actually design our behaviors to adapt to that. So my path I will say this for all the people who are like, why don't I know? Why haven't I figured it out? Why isn't it clear to me? I needed to go to all these places and excavate the toolkit that I needed to take to the next level. And it's been a series of doing that until finally I had more pieces to see the picture, to see where I fit.
It's funny, right? Because excavate's a major word, right? That I love that word, and it's part of my partner Annie's um, program, right? That we've developed, uh, the breath program. Begin where you are, reclaim your power, excavate your core values, allow not control, through not around, and then heal, right? And it's an
Mm-hmm.
oversimplification,
Mm,
obviously, and you repeat it. I feel like every time you get to H, you start back over again with another thing, right? Because it's a never ending process. But the goal is to learn it and be able to apply it to your daily life, right? So that you can continue on this path as long as you're alive. Because once you start this journey, it never ends. And the journey for
yes.
inner peace, the journey for inner wisdom, inner knowledge, connecting to yourself, connecting to whatever you believe in the universe. It's a it's a never ending journey. And when you say excavate my toolkit, I love it because it simplifies all our mistakes. It really helps us to realize that there is no
Mm-hmm.
mistakes, right? Like whatever we think we've done wrong was a lesson we needed to learn, right? And it's never ending lessons. And the amount of times that my stubborn self needed to learn the same lessons is pretty ridiculous. And I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. But it's when you start looking at it from a place that we're looking at it, right? It becomes this
Mm-hmm.
magical journey of, yeah, pain sucks and none of us want it. Um, but at the same time, it's okay. Like we're allowed to be in
Mm-hmm.
pain. We're allowed to feel and process and go through this journey, right? Because it's a never ending
Mm,
adventure. It's a never ending adventure,
yeah.
and it's magical.
Mm,
And when we look at it for what it is, having everything, losing everything, having everything, losing everything, having everything, losing everything, then really losing everything, and then you sit around and you say, okay, I guess I know how to get everything, so it's time to go get it, right? And get it for the right reasons,
yeah.
so that I don't just inherently just hand it away anymore, and know my value, know my worth, know what I'm bringing to the table. And it's this process is like it really can be this self created torture if we allow it to be, or we can look at it and say, my struggles are my lessons, and I'm learning something every step of the way, and I value the learning because the learning is how I
Mm,
impact others, right? Sharing my story is how I impact others directly.
yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
magic. I mean, that's the real magic, right? Is it's
Mm,
like me and Annie talk about. She inspired me to be self-inspired, and I inspired her to be self-inspired, and that was the greatest gift you can ever give anyone. Because the minute you're self-inspired, it, it reflects out of you, and you're able to help others become self-inspired. And when somebody can create something for themselves, no one can take that away from them, and that's power, right? That's power.
yes. Yes.
It-
Thank you.
It's it's so rare to find in the world today, but I think when we look 20 years ahead, it's going to be everywhere, right? Because I think
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
younger generations, the younger generations aren't going to put up with this shit. They're just not. They're not going to put up with the current shit. They refuse. They
Mm-mm.
rebel in every way possible, and I was probably a little bit, ahead of my time for as much as I rebelled in every way possible. But they're going to take
Mm-hmm.
these systems and rework them to a workable way that it works for all of humanity, not for the select few.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be this overwhelming. It's going to feel like an overnight, flip, but it's really this process has been happening for the last 20, 30 years. And it's just been slowly, gradually picking up steam. And, us talking about this openly live on LinkedIn would have never happened 20 years ago. Not because the technology didn't exist, or only because of that, but because it wasn't a conversation that people would have had then. But today, I'm comfortable having this conversation anywhere, everywhere, no matter what, because this is my truth, and I live it. And
Yeah.
it's an amazing experience. When you find your truth, your happiness, your peace, your fulfillment, you're not going to give that up. Like, you're not going to just roll
No.
over and give that up for any reason. So, how do you,
Mm.
right? Because you write, you're a writer, you're a teacher, you teach, you're also a student of life, right? So we can't forget that either, because you're still a
Mhm.
student, you're always a student, always learning. And so, how have you evolved in the last few years that's gotten you to the point where this program is ready to go? Because this program intrigues me
Mm.
beyond.
Hmm. Thank you. And thank you for everything you said. That was a beautiful, um, just like summary of what I think is happening. And wow, okay. So I'm going to get pretty real, which is I started to take my own medicine. So a lot of what I teach are how do you change your life? How do you step into that new idea of yourself that you've been thinking about, but you can't actually embody yet? Right. So I talk a lot about designing reality because that's fundamentally what it is. And at the heart of this, to mirror back what you were saying, I truly believe that life is a map. Every answer we need exists in front of us. And it is simply developing the perception to see it that unlocks the insight, the answer, the solution, etc. So that's why it's essential to get outside of you do not arrive at new answers by the known path. You need to go get lost. You need to like take that left turn into the wilderness. You need to go fight a monster in the dark, right? But you need to get off the road of the known. So, what I have seen in my work is that what I was doing for myself to actually generate in a breakthrough, right? I found myself in this place of like dissatisfaction, restlessness, just feeling like my job is like, ooh, like this isn't what I'm here to do, you
Right.
know? And I know I'm not alone in feeling that. Everyone feels that to some extent. And so I was like, well, how do I get that? How do I find that? How do I access that place of knowing? So I actually took myself on a journey for about a year. I traveled. Um, and part of it was I needed to get off my known path and into new worlds, new contexts, right? If you want to change something immediately, if you want to see something different, get the get out of your day, get out of your life, go on a trip, talk to someone new, right? Make a different choice that doesn't fit your paradigm. And as I was doing that, and it was all kind of like a hunch, an instinct. It was like, you need to go this way now. I didn't have any support. I didn't have a lot of people being like, yay, she's doing it. It was like everyone I know being like, why don't you have a real job? Why do you insist on going this way? But I've always gone that way.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of like hunting in the dark with a flashlight, having these wildly magical experiences that were uncanny, let's say. You go to a different country and you meet someone who has your answer.
Yep.
And so I did that for about a year. And I just kept trusting these instincts. And so funny when I tell this, because in the end, it's like there's all this magic happening and I'm not really driving it. I'm just listening to it.
Yes.
So I want to be really careful about saying, like, I was not directing this. I was literally like pulled into a portal for
Hmm.
about 3 years, just blindly trusting. But then something happened, Michael. I started working with this lineage, this divination tradition. And what was really fascinating about this was it is a language, it is a cosmology, it is a practice of communicating with everything, right? It's a training of coming into connection with everything. And as I was doing that, you know, at the simplest core of what it is an ancient earth medicine. And you are working with your ancestors, you are working with beings, you are working with the earth itself. And as I was doing these rituals, as I was doing this work, I started having epiphanies. And that was about a year and a half ago. And I've always had visions, I've always had knowings, but these epiphanies, I'd be like driving and it would just land. And I'd be like, oh my God, is that what you want me to do?
Yeah.
And so a lot of my work is based on a primal instinct, a primal knowing. And I think we are all connected to it. I think because I've been less, I am not someone that, is groomed easily. You picked up on that in our first meeting.
Hmm.
So, really reconnecting to my wildness has shown me, demonstrated that there is so much available. And as soon as I started to tap back into that knowing, it was like things just opened. They showed themselves to me. And so that was when I had been sitting on this idea for GodX for a while. I had all these hunches that there was a community, a template for a new society that wanted to emerge.
Hmm.
And that part of my work was to facilitate that. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to create a space where people can learn about these evolutionary technologies, right? Learn how to develop this level of perception. I believe that we need to be woven in to a community when we are going through any massive reorganization. It could be an
Hmm.
awakening, it could be a quantum leap, but when we
Hmm.
are being reorganized, we need to be integrated. So that to me is the space that was called for and that only I could birth.
So, okay. So here's my perception of what I believe. I'm okay. So I love everything you said, right? It's your journey and I love it and I respect it and I honor it. What I've realized
Mm.
is everything is magical. Everything is. We need to get out of our own way to be able
Mm-hmm.
to hold space for it, right? Like it reminds me of
Yes.
the book The Alchemist, right? Like the magic's always there. We just need to be able to see it, which means we've got to get out of our own way. And because of the
Yeah.
way society is, the way the generational connections, societal norms, stigmas, the way we're raised, the education system, I mean, I
Mm.
can go on and on. It rips that all away from us, right? It makes us sheeple, which I talk about all the time. And until we
Mm-hmm.
reclaim our power, right? We want to get started, we reclaim our power, and then we figure out who we are. I mean, the world opens up for us in ways we never expected. And it's
Yes.
this the magic's always there. But for us to tap into it, we need to be at such a centered, peaceful, connected place that we allow it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's
Mm.
soulmates, there's all these different things in the world, right, that we can list and go through, and they can inspire you to be ahead of where you really are at the time. right? But what that's doing is
Yep.
it's showing you a window of where you want to be if you look at it that way,
Mm.
right? So for me, it's a
Yep.
motivational tactic. For me, it's, oh my God, I saw something that I want, and I saw a version of myself that I wanted to be, and I went through a ridiculous amount of workaholic behavior over the last year to get where I am today. Like you said, I've always had my knowings, I've always had my connectedness, I've always had my abilities, my healing, my everything that I do, my clairvoyance, but it was never refined or clear like it is today. Right? The clarity today
Yes.
is uncanny. It's kind of scary because I know when
Mm-hmm.
somebody's going to call me. I know when a text is going to come through. I know what the conversation is going to be about before I have it. But I also leave it open to allow it to grow as it will. Now, there's certain aspects of my life
Mm-hmm.
I'm still working on this, right? Because that humanness, the emotional ties, there's mental ties, there's patterns of behaviors, which I call my subconscious, because my brain is trying to conserve calories no matter how many I eat. It wants to conserve them. Um, and it wants to, go back to patterns and behaviors. What I believe is when we get into our flow state, our natural state and flow state, that the subconscious gets smothered because our awareness of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves is so prevailing. And it's through our awareness that we're able to do those deep dives and really be open to the magic. Because the minute that you know your weaknesses and you become aware of them, and we'll always have flaws, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're still humans. We still are spiritual entities squeezed into these little human bodies, and we're not meant to fit in them, and it's fine. But we're meant to have the experience. And as long as we're self aware of the flaws, we can adapt how we live with them. And maybe some become strengths and maybe some are still just flaws. But with that openness, it creates the space for magic to flow through for everyone around you
Mm.
and maybe inspire others to take that journey with you. And that's the key, right?
Mm.
That's why I think everybody's journey and story is so important because there's again 8 billion people on this planet and there's 8 billion stories. The odds of, at least, let's say 2 billion being relatable to 8 billion is a lot easier than one being related to 8 billion. So you've got to get the numbers
Mm-hmm.
to a point of saturation of stories being told to where everyone feels
Yes.
that they are embraced. They're not a complete other. They're not completely lost. They're not
Mm-hmm.
completely backwards. They're not completely empty. It's just society and finding yourself. Hey, Dorothy. Dorothy just said hi. Um, it's just really magical journey that we go on when we allow ourselves to, and it's really spectacular. It
Yeah.
really is amazing when we allow ourselves to. So you live in the woods. I
Yes.
mean, you are off the grid. You are off the grid. You love being in nature. Nature loves with you, and right, you're like a modern day hippie-ish
Mm-hmm.
person, right? I
Mm-hmm.
like being around 10
Mm-hmm.
million people. So I won't live in the middle of nowhere once I'm allowed to leave. But until then, I'm stuck in
Mm-hmm.
nature and it's okay. And I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere and it's okay because it is a very healing place, right? There's something magical about nature and how
Mm-hmm.
our energy interact with it, right? And flow through it. It flows through
Yeah.
us and it creates this really amazing flow.
Mm.
But I really can't wait to be around 10 million people. I'm really excited, um, because I like
Mm.
being around people. This is just not my life. I need
Mm-hmm.
Starbucks on every corner. I need to be able to grab coffee when I want it. I like those conveniences. Whether it's walking, driving, whatever it is, I just want to be able to have it if I want it. Um, this is kind of teaching me a
Mm-hmm.
lesson that not everything's accessible at all times. You need to be patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm learning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning slowly. I'm quite stubborn, as we've discussed. So what? Let's talk about writing. Do you have a book yet? Yes, you have one, but you have a lot
I
more
do have a
coming.
book. Yes, I
So let's talk about
do.
your
I
book.
have
Let's talk about your book and future books.
yes. So Thank you for asking. And yeah, this year I self-published what I call a modern alchemy manual. And I think alchemy gets a lot of, I think it gets misinterpreted, right? People hear that and they think it's like bibbity bobbity boo. And my goal is to really help people see how easy it is to shift something. And as I've talked about, most of my work centers around this idea of making change into a game. How do we have fun with it? Because if you are resistant to change, that is your problem, right? That's the first problem. So when I was traveling, I had a lot of these encounters. And what my life has shown me, again, is life is the map. And you can actually distill a teaching out of pretty much any experience you have. So I started doing that. I started saying, what is actually happening here? What is life showing me? And then I would write about it. And at the end, I would extract this game. I would create a process, something that would help people. It's like what they talk about, Ruby on Rails. You create these like rails to help people, but I don't believe in people. I don't believe in giving answers. I don't have your answer. I have my answer. So that's the whole point. Is here is something that helped me get there. It might bring value to you, but in the end, I hope what it does is show you, give you an entrance point into playing in that space yourself, into donning this alchemical cap and giving it a try, right? So that's the first book that is available on Amazon. It's called The Art of the Experiment. And it's a really playful, fun book. It's not big. It's not boring. But that one was really good to write. And the other one that I've been working on this year that has not been published, it's called The Missing Language. And for me, it's a very personal memoir. Transformational teaching memoir is actually what they call it. And my story is, as an outsider, I didn't have a lot of places where I felt recognized. So it always felt like there was this piece missing, like this part of me that I was, this missing language. Like, what is the thing that's going to bring it all together? How do I get out of my own way to see it? And so the story is really tracing my journey as I'm going on these journeys, right? Sometimes you need to get lost to find yourself. And the story tracks is this missing language. Always. Yeah. Exactly.
Always.
Yes. There's this line in my book where I'm talking about I go on a trip with a random man into a jungle to see something. And the entire time I'm terrified that he's going to murder me. Right. And as I'm tracking everything, I'm like watching all the signs. I'm making sure I can run home if I need to. And he's telling me, as I'm doing this, he's literally saying to me, he's like, I've never felt fear. I've never felt fear. And I was just like, me and this person live in different paradigms. And so I go through this whole psychological journey. And at the very end, he literally takes me up on this building in the middle of the jungle so I can see everything. And we go to this cafe afterwards. And I literally am sitting there being like, why did I do this? Why am I here? And then he gives me a message. And it's one of those moments where you can almost like hear God laugh. Like, you had to go all the way over here just to get back here.
Right.
And he just says, he's like, you will get everything you want because you are that brave. You are willing to, as I put it, grab your machete and go to the jungle and clear the path for you. So, yeah, the book is definitely about doing
So
that.
are these all real stories, or are these based on your 3-year journey? So this is all real stories.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I have been given, yeah, I've been given some really interesting teachings along the route. And again, as you say, getting out of the way. The moment I let go of an itinerary and I say, I'm just going to show up. And then all of a sudden, there's a strange man sitting outside my door who's like, would you like to go on a journey?
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Let me take you into the jungle so that you can think I'm going to kill you the whole time. That's
Did not tell my mom
well,
about that experience.
no, no. But see here, like here's, I mean, think about my story, right? Like I came out here to save my kids in late February
Mm-hmm.
of 2020, and I get temporary custody or emergency custody March 6th of 2020. My first court date was supposed to be March 31st, but because of COVID and a tornado, it gets pushed back to October 28th, right? Then my second court date was supposed to be, my final court date was supposed to be March 9th, and because my soon to be ex-wife's attorney fired her the day before, it's pushed back to August 3rd of 2021. So by the time this is all said and done, I'm going to be here 15 months. And this is my journey,
Mm,
because this is me being way out of my element, being logistically, geographically away from anyone and anything I've ever known, raising 3 kids that have been damaged and abused, which then in turn forced me to go through my healing journey so that I can heal through this for trauma that I avoided my whole life. And then I meet somebody
wow.
on March 5th. Annie Lieb reaches out to me, and I don't know who she is. And she tells me everything's going to be okay after 10 days of waiting to get my kids when the paperwork was filed.
Mm,
And she reaches out and says everything's going to be okay. The next day I get my kids. And then now it's 15 months later, and, we're best friends. We're business partners. We're partners and
mhm.
everything, right? So it's like, I mean, like, how you can't make this stuff up. Like, this
No.
is exactly as it was meant to be. And me fighting it for those first 3 months did nothing but probably add on 8 months because I just fought it so
Mhm.
hard. And when I finally just said, you know what, I'm here, I'm stuck, I'm going to make the most of this, everything started falling in place. Now, it doesn't mean there wasn't bumps and lots of bruises along the way, because there was. It's a long journey, and it's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Um, it's just
Yes.
been it's just been magical though. Like there's no other way I can
Mhm.
explain the synchronicities of me meeting Adapia than Adapia introducing me to you exactly when I was ready to hear it
Mhm.
and ready to share what I shared, right? And just every person I've met in the last 15 months has been with intent. It's been
Mhm.
unbelievable. And the way that it's been is just, it's absolutely crazy.
You know, the Course in Miracles teaches that time is a teaching mechanism, right? And it will cease to be necessary once it is done teaching us. And I find that very fascinating, right? All of our ideas about time and what's supposed to happen and how do we get there. And this idea of forcing feels so antithetical to life to me. What is there to force? Everything happens in right timing because uh, when the conditions are right, time begins, right? You can't force the seed to become a flower. Or you can plant it, you can water it, you can feed it, you can talk to it, but you can't force it. And we forget that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that me and Annie have been going back and forth with a lot lately on the live shows and conversations and everything we've been doing is control, right? And I don't think any of us understand how much we control and how much we try to control. Like when I really
Yeah.
break things down, I've controlled so much of my life to self-preservation, to protect myself from
Mm-hmm.
future pain, to control outcomes so that I didn't have to go through certain things. Like every detail, even with my 3-year-old, she teaches me a daily, right? My 3-year-old teaches me every day how much I try to control her. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, and it's challenging and it's a lesson. And I learned more from my 3-year-old in a day than I learned in 13 years of schooling. Well, I shouldn't say 13. It was really 12 because I didn't graduate. Like, but I mean, I learned more from my 3-year-old in a day, a single day, than I learned in all my schooling.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it didn't teach me for life. It taught me to get me to the next level in an archaic, broken education system. Um, but that's going to change, and that's fine. I feel like we miss the mark as human beings
Mm.
so often, and we put ourselves into this rat race that we have to fit into something. When the reality is, we just have to be ourselves, and everything else gets attracted to us. Like when we get out of our own way and we allow and we create that space for ourselves, those that are meant to be in it find us. We don't have to look. The synchronicities, the
Wow.
serendipities, whatever you want to call it, it all just falls in place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. More and more, I believe that the less I do, the more I have, right? Because if everything is unfolding and it's me getting out of the way to allow the magic to come through,
Hmm.
then any interference, right, that it's coming from my own insecurity, my own self doubt, my own anxiety about the future, that's creating more complexity instead of less.
It, it's
It's a fun
really
thing to play.
funny. It's really funny when we really break it down, right? Like I was okay. So Annie's talking, and Annie says hi, and then she says, "The more you allow, the more you receive," and it's true, right? And
Yeah.
what's funny is
Yeah.
like like me and Annie have spent hours talking about this because my whole life I tried to control every scenario to protect myself, but it was always controlling me, right? Which then led me to control circumstances, situations, outcomes, businesses, business deals, business circumstances. It turned into this crazy thing of just a really control mess because I didn't even understand what it meant. But what I've realized
Mm-hmm.
is the more I allow, the more I get out of the way, the more, yes, the more I receive, like Annie said, but the more peace I'm at. And then the more safe space I create around me for myself, which then creates space for others to come in and be welcomed. Because nobody wants to walk into
Yes.
chaos. Nobody wants to walk into chaos. It's all about being able to hold that space for
Mm-mm.
ourselves so that we can welcome the right people.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Absolutely.
just, it's been
That's a
crazy. Like
beautiful way of putting it.
this journey has been so unbelievable in so many ways. And it was so
Mm.
against everything I thought, believed, whatever, imagined, that it just led me to this place where I am, you know, and
Mm.
and it's and it's nuts. See, Annie missed it, but I already talked about the breath framework, Annie. You have to go back and rewatch it. Not my fault. You're busy. Boo. Anyway, um, but yeah, it's true though, right? Like it's getting out of our way and clearing our bullshit out. Like when people say they do the work, it's to get rid of their bullshit. When people say the deep work, it's their emotional bullshit. When people say I'm going to therapy, it's to
Mm.
clear their mind, right? So how do you clear your soul?
Yeah.
You get to the point that you can actually see what's there, which means you got to do the other parts first. You
Mm.
got to clear your mind, your heart, your triggers, your habits, your behaviors, all these things that try and get in our way. And the more we're self-aware, the more we're able to stop that behaviors and habits and push people away and self-sabotage and not have any worth, not have any value within ourselves, not believe in ourselves, because it's so easy to want to latch on to something or somebody else and not want to believe in ourselves or have our own value or have our own worth. And the school system does nothing to help us, right? It tears us down. It rips it away from us. Upbringings because of generational handed down crap. That rips us to shreds, right? And the closest people to us, a lot of times, is family, but they're doing the best they can. It's not a judgment against them, because it's also a generational thing in how they were treated, how the people before them were treated, how, it goes way back, right? Like, to be grounded, centered, and in this magical place, you pretty much have to be raised by shamans and 12 generations deep. And that's about it. Like, there is no other way. Because this world is so saturated with chaos, and it has been for generations, that of course we're going to be raised into chaos, educated into chaos, grow into chaos, be consumed by chaos. And it's where we get stuck. So what I've noticed is around the world, as people are waking up, the ones that are really soul-centered and finding their purpose and finding their path speak in a certain terminology and come from a soul-centered place. Not a heart-centered, not a mind-centered, but a soul-centered, to where it radiates throughout the rest of your being. Energetically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. It radiates from you. And when something radiates that powerful from you and you're living within your soul's purpose, everything else falls in place. The effort is gone.
Yes. One of my favorite quotes, and I don't know who it's attributed to, so my apologies. And I'm going to butcher this, but it's essentially, if you are clever, you'll open a few doors in this world. If you are brilliant, you'll open many doors. But if you are vibrant, the doors will open for you.
Yes.
And that, to me, when I think about vibrance, I think about your soul ringing like a bell.
Yes. It's when you're at your high vibrations, right? When you're ringing at that peak vibration that you're at, and you're going to that level, and you're being at your highest, truest purpose. To me, that's your soul-centered life, right? Like, that is living within your soul-centered life, knowing your core values, living within them, being self-aware to maintain that space, and just doing the next right thing, helping people, being there, helping, putting yourself first and taking care of yourself so that you can be there for others. We're raised to believe that's selfish. It's not selfish. It's crazy.
I feel like we could do a whole show on this, this skewed mentality of our world, because to me it feels more and more as I come back to this idea of, that's why I'm in nature. Like, I needed to simplify, I needed to connect back to this, and so much has opened up as a result. And I'm not saying you need to go live deep in the woods as a hermit to have an awakening. God, no. And I truly feel that we deeply have lost our way as a culture. I think westernized American capitalistic culture as the barometer for every other culture on the planet. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case, but this idea of a leadership, and yet we are so backwards. We have completely lost the ability to wayfind. And instead, we just treat ourselves and our world and our goals and our vision as machinery.
Yeah.
And I just feel, to me, I'm like, what a loss. Like, how boring. That's part of the excitement of life, is how do you discover, wake up to the magic you are, the role and the skills you have that are part of your adventure toolkit. And where are you? What level are you on? Who's the monsters you're fighting? Like there's just this idea of the world that is so soul sucking to me. And this year, I pretty much divested, and the repercussions have been fascinating. I get a lot of like this from the outside, like, oh my God, who are you? Like,
Right, right,
how are you living? And I'm like, surprisingly, I'm living super well.
right, right.
It
Like
just
life
doesn't look
is
anything
easy.
like advertised. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's
But
magical. It's weird.
I think it goes back to, like, I'm really looking back, right? Like, okay, so Far Eastern royalty, right? Like the royal families of China, Mongolia, and all that stuff, right? Like, I guess that's where the hierarchical stuff really probably deeply started. And then, well, King
Mm,
David, I don't know. Like, it might even go a little further, but like, if you mix it all together and you really look, it was just this slow evolution of soul sucking that just got worse and worse. And then Europe did a great job of creating early capitalism, right? And then, America and beating big bad Britain, UK, whatever they called them at that time, right? Because, we're going back a couple hundred
mhm.
years. And it's like 300 years, I guess. But we're like, no, 200, something like that. But we're like looking, like, if you look at it, it was a slow de evolution over time, right? And it was slow,
Bingo.
slow, capitalistic, materialistic. Your worth is what you can own. And then people turn into narcissists because magically they want to own things, and because slavery is not legal anymore, thank God, right? White, black,
Mhm.
pink, purple. There was all
Mhm.
colored slaves over the history of time. Not getting into a race thing. I refuse, because it's a human race, and if you can't understand that, that's fine by me. That's not my problem. But when I look at it, like,
Mhm.
now you have people saying everybody's narcissist. Well, how could they not be when they're raised that the more they own, the better they are? So now they're just collecting people through narcissistic tendencies. And I
Mhm.
don't think everyone with narcissistic tendencies is a narcissist. I don't think everyone with sociopathic tendencies is a sociopath. I believe that we have a culture that
Mhm.
breeds. If you're doing wrong, bury it and just keep doing what's in your best interest. And what we need to do is get people back to that hurt level, because once they're at the hurt level, we can guide them to
Mm.
the soul level. We can guide them to the soul level, but we got to get them to the heart level
Yep.
first, because right now they're disconnected from their heart. And that doesn't do us any good. It doesn't do anyone any good. So we need to go back to the
Mm-mm.
basics of the human race. We need to go back to the basics of, we are all in this together, whether we believe it or not, we are. The
Yeah.
99.9% have to understand that they're much bigger than the 1/10 of a percent. And it's time to evolve humanity back into a positive light again and guide them towards that.
Mm. Yes. Yes. One of my guiding, um, way back before any of this had manifested or materialized, my guiding vision was we need a new story for humanity.
Mhm.
And the Tibetan Buddhists, in their death practices, believed that you could practice by designing your own archetypal vehicle of transformation to navigate any realm. And that to me has been the inspiration this entire time, was what is the transformational vehicle that is going to help humanity re-envision a way of being alive, because we have completely run out of time on this timeline. So what's the new story? What's the new timeline? What's the new quantum leap look like? Who do we want to be
Right,
next?
right. And it's time for us to write that narrative ourselves. And it's time for us to really find our soul center, to be able to, as a collective, do it in the best interest for humanity, not for the few. Or we end up in
Mm-hmm.
the Hunger Games. And that's possible
Mm-hmm.
too. It's either going to be utopia or dystopia. We all get to choose. It's either the few or the masses decide. And I don't know. Who knows what the masses really want, I guess. Maybe they like being sheeple. But either
Mm,
way, we are at the
mm,
end. Do you have last minute comments or anything that you would like to mention before we end?
mm. Well, I just first want to express my thanks, Michael. This has been such a beautiful, powerful conversation to open my week with. And thank you to anyone who tuned in. And if anyone has any questions, wants to reach out and connect, please do. I will be resharing this, but I am always open to and welcoming interesting conversations with fascinating people.
Yes, and they are very enjoyable. And Catherine is a wealth of wisdom and knowledge and experiences. So please do reach out to her and please connect with her because she is magical and allowing her magic to flow. Her magic is being allowed to flow, and she is standing.
Mm,
She's standing into it today, and that's a beautiful place to be. So,
thank you so much,
everybody,
Michael.
you are so welcome, and everybody have an amazing day. Have a great week, and you guys are going to be stuck seeing a ton of me this week and next week because me and Annie are going to be live. I think 12 times in the next 2 weeks. So this should be entertaining for the world. So enjoy, world. Welcome us into your lives because you're going to be stuck with us. Have an amazing day, Catherine, and thank you so much. And goodbye, everybody, for now.
Yeah.